This is the Spiritual Genius Show, the #1 podcast for unlocking more of your spiritual genius so you can really have it all. Get ready to discover timeless strategies and secrets you can use. You'll also hear from world-class entrepreneurs, leaders, athletes, and celebrities sharing how they've tapped into their spiritual genius, along with how you can do the same. Without further ado, here's your host, Yakov Smart.
Welcome. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the secret F word that instantly makes you happier and more attractive. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and it's likely going to be transformational for you too. In fact, I would say this. I would say that it's difficult to tap into your spiritual genius without fully understanding this topic. So, can you guess what this F word might be? I'll give you some hints. Everyone knows about it, but it can still be kind of a taboo topic that not a lot of people like to talk about openly. I'd recommend exploring this F word and its different flavors in private, but I suppose it can be done in public too. And as you explore this word and this topic, you may experience moments of release, the point of euphoria during and often after. Any guesses to what that F word might be? If you guess forgiveness, you would be correct. Because when we talk about forgiveness, not only are we talking about forgiving others, we're talking about forgiving ourselves, which I have found oftentimes to be that much more challenging and difficult. And this is an area that I really started to explore as part of my journey in the summer of 2021. I'll share the story in a few minutes. But it was really a summer of traveling inwards. Oftentimes we hear about how expansive travel can be and how going to these different places, exploring the world, how it can broaden us, give us new ideas, help us grow as a person. And I think all that is well said and often true. And at the same time, I don't know about you, but my inward travels often yield the biggest transformation, the biggest results. These are travels you can make without having to get on a plane or go anywhere in the comfort of your home, exploring in private. Sometimes people will call this, quote unquote, doing the work. I hate that saying, by the way. I mean, I understand what it means. If you're at all spiritually curious, you probably heard that expression, even in the personal development space. Oh yeah, that person has done the work. But is it really doing the work? Or is it traveling and exploring and unraveling different parts of yourself? Okay, because to me, that's not work. That's spiritual exploration. That's inner exploration. And when you put it like that, when I look at it like that, it sounds much lighter. It sounds much more powerful. And it sounds much more empowered, actually, versus doing the work. Because when you say doing the work, to me, it just kind of implies, oh yeah, you've got to do the work. Like, no, like explore. Release, become. That's the whole journey. So the whole doing the work thing, that's my soapbox on that topic. Anyway, so I'll get into traveling inwards and I'll share that story in a little more detail in a moment. But I want to give you a concept here. As we start to talk about forgiveness, you may have heard this, may not have heard this. This is important, okay? This idea of a drama triangle. Honestly, I'm not sure where this concept of a drama triangle even comes from. I think it was developed in psychology. There's someone to attribute it to, you can look it up. But the way the triangle goes, I want you to picture a triangle right now. On one side of the triangle, you have the victim. On the other side of the triangle, you have the perpetrator, i.e. the person or the people oppressing the victim or the victims. On the third side of the triangle, you have the quote unquote hero, the savior. And anytime there's drama, and maybe this even comes from the world of like theater or storytelling, think about any movie, right? Any movie has conflict, right? Any movie that's worth watching anyway. I can't even think of a movie that doesn't have conflict. So imagine you have a movie and there's some drama happening. There's some conflict. It's going to be framed typically as someone's being oppressed, someone's the oppressor, and someone's riding in knight in shining armor, if you will, to save the day. Okay, those are drama triangles. Anytime we have drama in our lives at any level, we are playing into some sort of triangle, right? Whether it's you saying, oh, that person really screwed me over, that person scammed me, that person's an asshole, right? Or you say, man, I should have done that better. I feel really bad for that person. I'm, ashamed of all that kind of stuff, right? Or you're saying, that's injustice, that's BS. I'm going to stand up for that person because that person's being oppressed. When you do this, when you play any role, when you wear any of these hats, you are in the drama triangle, right? This metaphorical drama triangle. It just leads to more drama. Okay. So any conflict, anytime you've got drama in your life with any person, organization, anything of that nature, even with yourself, actually, which we'll talk about a little later, because sometimes that's the most challenging one to decipher. It's because you're inside of the drama triangle. So if you want to end the drama energetically, one thing you could always do in any situation, you have the power to make this choice right now, okay, is you step out of the triangle, okay? You refuse to play the role of victim, you refuse to play the role of perpetrator, and you refuse to play the role of hero. So I'll give you an example. We'll start vague and we'll get more specific here. So let's say a relationship, right? Two people are talking about their previous relationship. Well, let's just say it's two guys in this example. We'll rotate genders and that type of thing today, just to make sure that we're being balanced, right? So you got two gentlemen sitting at a bar. They're talking about their relationship that they just got out of, and it's kind of a woe is me pity party that they're doing unintentionally. Oh yeah, my ex was a narcissist, and she did this and she did that, and she screwed me over, and she cheated. All this kind of stuff, right? And the other guy is just nodding his head about, yeah, man, F her, right? Or what we could do the same thing, right? You know, having similar types of conversations. We all have done this as human beings, right? I'm not saying that we're perfect people. I'm not saying that we haven't done this, but being conscious of this alone starts to snap that pattern, because those conversations, it's interesting because those conversations in that example, those two guys, they're serving the guys. Well, how are they serving them? Because the drama is giving them energy. That's how they're serving them. If you look at the map of consciousness, okay, which I've talked about on a previous episode, it's a concept that's been around for a while. David Hawkins kind of coined it. Fred Dodson wrote Levels of Energy. If you look at the map of consciousness, okay, and if you look at the lower pockets of energy, okay, fear calibrates at 100 and anger calibrates at 160. High anger calibrates at 180. Pride calibrates at 190, right? So someone is that if they were in fear or unfulfilled desire, or they're feeling whiny, the get your ex back type of crowd, right? If they can go from 125 to 160, their energy and consciousness in that situation is actually rising. Crazy, right? Because we're not talking about a conscious activity. We're talking about getting angry and moaning and whining. Okay, that's where drama triangles serve people. Okay. And at the same time, being that drama triangle leads to more drama, right? Because holding on to those feelings, holding on to those emotions, holding on to those grudges does not serve you or anyone. And it doesn't hurt the person you're angry at. It only hurts you, right? Which we'll talk about in a moment. So that's the drama triangle. So in the case of these two gentlemen, right? So you've got one guy that his buddy is validating the drama, right? So in this case, who's playing what role? In this case, the guy's playing the role of victim. The ex is playing the role of perpetrator. She's not even there, but in this triangle, by the way, the triangle it's all made up, right? So she's playing the role of perpetrator. And I'm not saying it's true, not true. This is not the issue here. Okay. We'll get to that in a second. And in the case of this drama triangle, objectively speaking, his buddy who's nodding his head saying, yeah, man, F her, is playing the role of hero without even thinking he's being a hero. He's got his own problems, right? That's the drama triangle, and drama begets more drama, okay? This is where if you continue being in a drama triangle, it's easy to create bigger and bigger triangles, right? It's easy to then become a man who hates women or a woman who hates men, like as an example, right? This applies to business as well. Oh yeah, that person scammed me, that person screwed me over. It's the drama triangle. In that case, they're the villain, okay, or i.e. the perpetrator. You're the victim, and the hero is whoever you're complaining to. Okay, that person can play the role of hero and say, yeah, F them. What? Like, what are we doing here? Right? So you see the narrative, okay? You see these drama triangles. The best way to snap out of drama, and we're talking about the power of forgiveness here, but the best way to snap out of drama is to step out of the triangle. Okay, how do you do that? So if you are in a triangle and you're playing hero or savior, recognize the person can only save themselves. Okay. You have to hold the person responsible for their own reality. Okay? You can support them, you can cheer them on, you can pat them on the back, but enabling the drama just to agree with them and hold the peace, I don't think that serves anyone. Okay. If you are feeling like the victim in a situation, the best way to step out of the triangle is to take unconditional responsibility. I'm not saying that there's not right or wrong. Okay. I'm not saying that there's not times where we're wronged or oppressed or genuinely, lied to or deceived. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. Quite the opposite. But at the same time, the moment you say, oh, that person scammed me versus, man, I made the wrong decision, doesn't mean you shouldn't do anything about it. But it puts you in an elevated state of being more empowered around it versus putting all your responsibility onto that person. That's a lot of power and energy that you'd be giving that person. Okay. If you're feeling like the perpetrator, oh man, I messed that up. Oh man, that deal didn't go well, right? Okay. You step out of it, get what can we do about it? And it starts with forgiving yourself, okay, which we'll talk about here in a few moments as well. That's the drama triangles. So I'm very conscious of this because it's a very easy for you listening to the sound of my voice right now to say, oh man, this guy knows a thing or two. I really like this guy. Maybe he can help me solve problems. And maybe I can, maybe I can't. But at the same time, I'm here to tell you, be your own effing hero, okay? To say that other person is going to come in riding on a knight in shining armor, whatever you think of, is just false, right? We all have the power within us to be our own heroes, right? Part of spiritual genius is owning that, yes, you can have guides. Yes, you have intuition. Yes, you can have people you trust. But at the end of the day, the hero of your story is you, okay? Any situation, the power, the keys, they're in your hand, they're in your pocket, they're in your bag. It's you. You are the hero, okay? And oftentimes what happens in these drama triangles, they play out because I'm sure you've heard the saying trauma bonding. If you haven't yet, it's people bonding because of trauma, right? Because of, negativity or drama and all those different things. And a lot of people do this at the subconscious level. And I think sometimes as human beings, we all do it depending on what state we're in all the time, right? It just happens. I'm not judging it here. It just happens, right? Observing. So what happens is through these like drama bonds, people feel more connected, but they're actually not lifting each other up. They're actually keeping each other down. That's just the irony of it, okay? And so anytime you find yourself resenting others, okay, and judging people, hanging on to stuff from the past, it might be serving you in allowing you to feel angry about it instead of shameful, for example. Things like holding grudges. But at the same time, I believe on a spiritual, energetic level, it hurts you exponentially more than it could ever hurt the person. If you look at things energetically, and I'll talk about some resources here in a second, if you hold anger towards someone, it actually doesn't really hurt them, right? It hurts you. It can eat away at you, right? So this is where you think about any situation where you're angry or upset with someone, or you feel like you're judging someone. It's the saying, I think, from Confucius, and this is also in the Bible and a lot of other places, if you're pointing a finger, you've got three pointing back at you, right? So this idea of judging people is actually something that lowers your energy. Same thing with holding grudges or saying, oh man, when I was a kid, that person really effed me over, right? And telling that story again, or if you got to have a relationship, oh yeah, that person was terrible. This is where we draw the line, okay? Because that might be true. Maybe they completely did things that were immoral. Maybe they did things that were flat out wrong. Is there such a thing? Absolutely. At the same time, judging them or remaining angry or bitter or resentful diminishes your power. It blocks your happiness. It makes you less attractive to everything that you want. So this is one of those things where once you realize this, and we're going to talk about a process here a little bit later and a great resource, but once you realize this, you have the power to forgive anyone for anything. There is no law that says you can't forgive someone for something. Now, when I say forgive, you may be saying to yourself, well, I can't forget that. I'm not going to be best friends with that person. That person screwed me over. That person's a real asshole. Maybe. You could be 100% right. At the same time, when I say forgive, I don't mean forget. I don't mean you have to be best friends with the person or love them unconditionally and, pretend all that. You don't have to, right? If you want to, great. But at the same time, forgiving someone simply means, from this standpoint, releasing that energy and being in acceptance. If you can be neutral towards someone or something, that's where forgiveness comes into place, right? If you can neutralize a situation, right? We're not talking about saying, oh, you're a saint and you unconditionally love that person or that situation now. We're talking about simply neutralizing it, because neutrality carries a much higher energy typically than something like anger or resentment, right? This is where you see the bitter old man or the bitter old woman, like they still haven't forgiven, right? It's never too late to forgive someone, including yourself, okay? So for me, this was a really, really big deal, okay? When I was younger, when I was a kid, and even in my teenage years, and even in my 20s, a lot of my 20s, without even realizing it, I was an absolute asshole to myself, in the sense that I would beat myself up, my self-talk, mentally, emotionally, not physically, but pretty brutal myself mentally and emotionally, right? And this inner critic inside dominated. If you haven't heard of the inner critic, it's a concept from psychology. What that means is we all have this, right? No matter how ascendant spiritually you may or may not be, right? We all have an inner critic, right? The inner perfectionist. We have this inner voice in our head that wants to criticize us. And that inner critic, ironically, is also an inner judge that judges others, right? So it's kind of like you have this voice or this aspect of you that lives inside you, okay, that comes from a place of judgment. So according to this voice, you're never good enough. Others are never good enough, okay? And some of us have had inner critics who are just absolutely brutal, right? Because it's all about, let's say you spill water, okay? Just something dumb like that. Right? You're pouring water, you spill water. If your inner critic goes up, the inner critic, the dialogue is like, oh, you are always clumsy, and like you mess everything up, and this is just an example. It's brutal. It can be very, very brutal. It's the meanest. It's like having an inner bully, okay? It's bullying you all the time. Every step that you take, you can be brutal and domineering, okay? And it's draining, right? It diminishes your light every way when that inner critic takes control, when that inner judge is running the show. Now, sometimes people use that towards greatness. Sometimes people propel that to achieving great things. At the same time, they're still never happy. These are perfectionists who are still restless because maybe they can achieve and create great things, but they're still not satisfied. And I think there's something very noble in the journey. I think there's something very noble in having high standards and being excellent. And at the same time, there's a big difference in getting to that place with acceptance as opposed to being driven by some inner critic, okay, where you don't have control and it sucks and it drains your energy. So what I recognized was that I had a terrible relationship with my inner critic. I wasn't empowered around it, and it was a way of creating self-sabotage. I wasn't aware of this relationship. And so in the summer of 2021, this is where I started going down these inward travels, if you will, talking about forgiveness, okay? And because I understood, I had heard about some of this stuff intellectually, sure. But from a standpoint of how do you actually forgive, especially how do you forgive the quote unquote unforgivable in air quotes, okay? This is the spiritual aspect of it. So I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm guided to things. Maybe you were guided to the show. Maybe someone shared this episode with you, whatever the case may be. But every once in a while, I'm guided to go on Amazon, good old Amazon.com, and search for a book title, okay? Especially when I have a problem that I don't know how to solve. I trust source, the universe, the guidance will show up. The guidance will be there, okay? And I remember in the summer of 2020, just broken up with someone who had been dating for almost 2 years, the longest, pretty much the only like real quote unquote serious relationship I had been in. And it really took a toll emotionally. Not even because I was mad at her, it's because I was mad at myself. Because in that relationship, I had done some things that if I could go back and do them differently, I would have done differently. Okay, it is what it is. So I'd lied by omission about a few things regarding finances. And the biggest thing was I had deceived myself in thinking, looking back, that that was the relationship that I was going to be in for the rest of my life. There were some fundamental things that were flawed in that relationship, looking back now. I was too in it to understand it in the moment, like looking back, but it was what it was. Okay. And I can say that objectively and neutrally right now. So I was feeling terrible. I was feeling guilt, shame, all these different things. And I typed in forgiveness on Amazon. And these two books came. There was a book called Radical Forgiveness, and there was a book called Radical Self-Forgiveness. Okay. And I knew intuitively that they were very similar, and that for my spiritual journey, I would start with radical self-forgiveness. Okay. So I discovered this book. It's available on Amazon. Highly recommend it if there's anything that you feel ashamed about or that you haven't forgiven yourself. Now, you may be listening and saying, well, I really made some mistakes. I really effed some things up. I really acted wrongly. And that's okay. I'm not saying to omit that. I'm not saying that that may not be true, but holding on to it, holding energy around it, not forgiving yourself, that's wrong in itself, right? So you can own it, you can be accountable, you can make amends, do all these different things, right? And at the same time, releasing the drama triangle that we talked about earlier, that's where the radical self-forgiveness and the radical forgiveness chime in, right? Because it was an emotional mess. I didn't know how to deal with my inner critic. And ironically, a lot of my actions in that relationship were shaped by not knowing how to forgive myself or how to manage my emotions, right? Or from having not done, quote unquote, the work, right? Having done these inward travels. And this was a catalyst for going down that rabbit hole. And what I really enjoyed about this book, it gave the concept of forgiveness. No one teaches this stuff in school. No one talks, okay, this is how you forgive. Here's the how-to manual. No, I think if anything, it's taught in like religion and some spiritual text, right? But it's also not taught in a process-oriented way. Just, oh yeah, you should just be a saint and love and forgive. Sometimes easier said than done, right? So what I really enjoyed about this book is it talked about the concept of forgiveness being at a spiritual level and spanning beyond just logically forgiving someone. Because logically you say, oh yeah, I forgive, but you can still deep down hold a lot of anger and resentment towards yourself, towards that person, and that's okay. It's actually the first step. So how do you do it? You don't have to be a saint to forgive. The very first thing is, and there's a process in there I'll talk about called the 3 letters that is one of my favorite processes. I use this to this day. I think of it as having spiritual tools in the tool belt that are energetic tools that anyone can use, okay? But it starts with separating yourself from the judge, okay? It's learning not to judge. Like we talked about, gossiping is a form of judgment. Drama triangles are a form of judgment. And sometimes judgment comes up subconsciously, and that's okay, right? Sometimes you see someone dressed a certain way or you think something about them. That's okay. It can happen. No need to judge yourself for judging sometimes, right? Sometimes it just happens. Okay, you can always release that. And I believe there's a difference between judging and observing. Okay, observing is sometimes you can infer something about someone based on their energy, based on their appearance, and play with that a little bit. Versus judging is you tie in an emotion to it, right? You pass a judgment. And I've come to the point, on most things anyway, you can tell me something about yourself, just about anything actually. At this point, it's taken a while to get here. And I'll say, okay, doesn't mean that I want to be your best friend. It doesn't mean that I want to spend all day with you. But I'm not going to say, oh, you're a bad person because of that. No. Who am I to judge? It's the way that I look at it, right? So coming from more of that neutral place. Again, we don't necessarily have to go from like, oh yeah, we judge them. No, we just love that person. No, but at least getting to neutral. That's really the key thing here. So self-judgment, like we talked about, can be devastating. It was draining so much energy for me. And I'll tell you a secret. Sometimes, depending on certain contexts, it still comes up, and that's okay. So it's not like, oh yeah, you learn this exercise and you are cured of self-judgment for the rest of your life. No, not what we're talking about here. It still comes up. It's part of the human experience, right? I feel like it's part of a spiritual process and a spiritual journey. So if and when this comes up for me, okay, I remember, so one of the tools that I use is the 3 letters process, okay, and I'll share that in a moment. If you're looking for more clarity right now, whether that's in your business, career, relationships, or any other area of your life, I've recorded a short training you can use to find more clarity, spiritual genius style. This training is my gift to you for being a listener of the show. To access it, all you have to do is go to spiritualgenius.org/gift. Once again, that's spiritualgenius.org/gift. Now back to the show. And it's really funny because this is a process that it's not painful physically. It's not even painful mentally, but sometimes I notice myself having some resistance to the process. Like, oh, well, procrastinating or not doing it. And anytime we think about releasing exercises, by the way, I want to define what releasing actually is, okay, in my standpoint, from the spiritual standpoint, okay? To me, releasing is simply releasing energy. There's a book called Letting Go by David Hawkins. It talks about letting go of energy and releasing energy. And sometimes, it's kind of funny, right? It's like if we were to walk around and never shower, right? Can you imagine back in the day how people would just walk around and they would just smell terrible and never shower, right? And now how much they would stink. But most people probably smelled bad, so they didn't realize that the other person stank unless they had like bugs crawling on them or something nasty like that. Right? It's kind of where we're at as a society with releasing, right? Most people are walking around with so much baggage. It's so heavy, right? And at the same time, we all are too. So we don't even see it unless people just act out on it. Then we start to notice it, right? So it's like that. So releasing is simply releasing energy. You may be saying, well, how do you do that? Different show, different time, a lot of different ways to do that, a lot of different ways to process it. I like the letting go technique in the book, Letting Go. But to me, I know when something's released, there's a couple of different ways that I know. And this is what I believe are things that move energy, okay? Either tears, okay, yes, crying is a way of releasing energy. Someone has trouble crying, to me, they have trouble releasing, okay? There can be shaking in the body, laughter, oftentimes a great way to release, and you feel lighter after, sometimes even to the point of euphoria. So this, to me, the 3 letters tool is a great tool for releasing because it's logical, it's practical. You don't have to even believe in it. You don't even have to agree with it, but you can do it and you can watch what happens. And it is a practice that you can do again and again. So I read this in the book. This comes from Colin, okay, in both Radical Self-Forgiveness and Radical Forgiveness. I'm not going to give you every step here because that cheapens it. I highly recommend if this is a topic that resonates with you at all, okay, you want to cultivate this or even explore this, reading one of those books. He goes in the process in much more detail. And to really get the process, I recommend looking at those books. But I'll give this to you in 3 steps. This is about shifting hats. It's about shifting angles and perspectives. Okay, you don't have to agree with it. You don't have to believe in it. You don't have to be spiritual to do this process, right? He talks about this in the book. So what you do is you write 3 letters. Okay, whether you're forgiving yourself or forgiving someone else. Okay, if you're forgiving yourself, you address the letters to yourself. If you are forgiving someone else, you address the letters to them. If you are forgiving someone else and writing these letters, okay, do not send them the letters. That is a big part of the book. So the first letter comes from your inner judge, that inner critic, that inner voice. And to really grasp the exercise, and this could take a little bit of practice, okay, so play with it. You really want to go off. You want to get angry. You want to get judgy. You really let yourself or the other person have it. You put pen to paper or you type it out and you let it effing rip. Whether it takes 5 minutes, an hour, you just let it all out, okay? And in the book, he recommends, I believe, the official process is the first day, write the judge letter. The second day, write the second letter, which we'll talk about in a second. The third day, write the third letter, and then rinse and repeat. Oftentimes, when I do this, I personally condense this down, okay? So I'll write the judge letter, right? So if I'm writing to myself, I address the letter to myself. If I'm forgiving someone else, I address the letter to them. And I write the letter, and it's judgy, it's angry, it's mean, it's not politically correct, it's vicious, it's as nasty as I can get, okay? I really try to put myself in that state. And then afterwards, I write the letter. I read the letter out loud. Sometimes I'm yelling, sometimes I'm crying, and I put that energy into it. The whole goal there is to feel the emotion, right? So we suppress anger, feel it, right? And that's the judge letter. Usually at that point, there's going to be an initial release of energy, okay? Either crying, laughing, both sometimes, okay? The next letter, which once again in the book, I think he recommends waiting till the next day, but I'll typically do this right after, okay? You want to give yourself space and time to do this process, right? You don't need to justify, you don't need to explain to someone. This is a process that takes some space and time, so the traveling inward. The next letter comes from the standpoint of your inner lover. This is the part of you that just love. This is the heart. This is where you can love unconditionally, okay? And what you're doing is you're acting as if you have to defend and love and appreciate the person who is being judged, whether that's yourself or whether that's the other person, okay? And if you have trouble with this, you're really still pissed off at someone, okay? It's at least showing love for them as a human being. And again, as if you were paid $1 billion to come to this person's defense. You don't have to agree with it, put pen to paper, try to have some love and some empathy, okay? Just try it. Write that letter, you read it out loud, you feel it as much as you can feel it. The third letter is the letter from higher self. So it's looking at the spiritual perfection, looking at the spiritual growth. Okay? And he's got a nice framework in the book for this, right? If you're wondering how this works. Okay, so again, I recommend reading the book. I'm just giving you the high level overview to inspire you to actually read the book and develop the practice. Okay, so you're writing it from higher self, and now you read the letter out loud. Okay, and it's amazing because the whole point of the process isn't to write the world's most elaborate letters. It's to move energy. It's to release energy. That's the whole point of the process. But what I love about this is it's a logical, process-oriented approach. Even if you don't consider yourself super intuitive, or if you haven't done this type of work, it's something that you can use to get to that releasing place. Okay, even if you're not about guided meditations, it's okay. That's the 3 letters exercise. There's a couple other exercises in the book. Once again, it's the last time I'll say this, highly recommend finding that there. Reading about forgiveness, even reading about the book, will elevate your understanding of forgiveness and give you a different appreciation for it. Okay, so think of this episode as the gateway to that for you. Okay, there's no limits on how many people you can forgive. Okay, you can forgive anyone and everyone from your past. Okay, you can forgive family members, you can forgive former romantic partners, you can forgive yourself, because holding on to grudges or anger towards any of those people, even towards yourself, isn't serving you. It's making you heavier, less happy, less attractive. It's a really, really big deal. Okay. So anytime, okay, if you're triggered being around family, you can run this process. And I'm not saying have the conversation with them, because their energy's in it. It dilutes the conversation, but do this on your own. Be amazed at what can happen. Okay. And maybe you're in a place, I've been this way with people or situations, of denial without even knowing. Right? Saying, oh, it's all my fault. That person was a saint. That person was perfect. That's also drama triangle. If you're feeling that way about someone or some situation, you can rest assured you're coming at it from the place of you being the perpetrator. So you got to step out of the triangle and see it neutrally for what it was. Okay. This is something you can do with someone who's deceased, someone you'll never speak to again. You can forgive anyone. Okay. You can do this in a more mild way if you're driving and someone's a bad driver and pisses you off. Just feel the anger for a second, release it, forgive them. No need to do the exercise, right? It's a practice though. It's a tool, it's a practice. So like I mentioned, this is a tool that you can use and implement for the rest of your life and your spiritual journey. It goes way beyond the logical level. As I was talking about earlier, this is an easy thing to procrastinate though. Like the whole releasing practice is an easy thing to procrastinate. I'm not saying sit there for hours and hours every day releasing stuff, and I'm not saying any of that stuff, and I'm not making any medical or any recommendations at all on this show, just to be very clear. So we always say in the disclaimer. And at the same time, this is an idea that when you use it, it might just make you happier and more attractive. Okay. It might just change your life. But be amazed at what happens with your current relationships and your relationship with yourself. It's a great tool in the tool belt that's available to anyone listening to the show, listening to the sound of my voice right now. Okay. Now, it can take some practice, but you innately know how to do it. Okay. You innately know, you'll be amazed at how naturally it can come to you. Like I mentioned earlier, there can be accountability and transformation without judgment. It's actually much, much easier. Okay, because then if you take the drama out, okay, I messed up. What am I going to do about it? Great, problem solved much faster versus dwelling in the drama. Let's talk about some examples from all three areas that kind of bring us home on this. Okay, so we talked about dating, relationships a little bit earlier, right? Let's say you went through a nasty divorce and your former spouse cheated on you. They were completely just a terrible person to you. Okay, it's easy to get in the trap. Oh yeah, F that person, right? I'm not saying be their best friend. I'd say even have an amicable relationship. But can you step out of the triangle? Can you go through the forgiveness process? And even if you just get back to neutrality and acceptance, it's going to serve you so much more. Okay. Let's talk about health, for example. Let's say you're a few pounds overweight and it annoys you because you used to be a great athlete or you used to be in great shape. And now you can't believe you let yourself slip. Been eating crap, been eating hot dogs all day or something, right? You can do the self-forgiveness, right? Now you're stepping out of the triangles. You're not going to be the perpetrator and the victim to yourself. You're stepping out of the triangle. Now you've forgiven yourself, neutralize it. It is what it is. What am I going to do about it? You change your diet, you change your exercise, you change who you are to get the result. Okay, this is a catalyst for change and transformation. Just one of the best parts of this. Okay, the practicality of it. Let's say in business, maybe someone screwed you over. Okay, someone lied to you, deceived you. Okay, stole your money. Whatever the case may be, you're going to be the victim or you're going to step out of the triangle, forgive them. I'm not saying to deal with them. I'm not saying not to seek justice if you need to seek justice, right? Litigation, whatever the case may be. But instead of dwelling on it, go learn from the mistakes, solve the problem as much as you can, and focus on growth, focus on where you're headed, okay, in the present moment. I'm not saying that these are challenging things. I'm not saying it's not easier said than done sometimes, but you're worth it. It's worth you exploring this practice. One of the most powerful things you can do for yourself and for others and for people that are in your life and people that are going to be in your life. Okay. Because when you ignore forgiveness, when you hold on to grudges and anger without even knowing it, when you walk around stinky like we were talking about, it doesn't serve anyone. Okay. You're taking power away from yourself. This is going to allow you to feel towards that path of being more in your power. Okay. And it can be a process. It can take several iterations of the exercise to get to neutral. Okay. It can be a little challenging at first, and that's okay. Right. It's a practice, just like learning anything, just like learning a new sport or a new instrument, right? Or lyrics to a new song, right? You can be a beginner at this practice. This is a strong, strong tool to have in your tool belt. Okay. And the practice sometimes is in the moment, right? Just even remembering to do this, you'll be amazed at what can happen. So this is a topic that certainly needs to be talked about more, especially to the types of people who are success-minded, growth-minded, spiritually curious, spiritual people listening to this show. If this resonated with you at all, or if it at least reminded you of one or two things, please do me a favor, share this with one or two friends. You can tag me on social media. Let's get this out there. This is a big message. Appreciate you being here. And remember, your spiritual genius awaits.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Spiritual Genius Show. Remember to subscribe and leave a 5-star review. When you email a screenshot of your review to info@spiritualgenius.org, we'll send you access to a special training on unlocking more of your spiritual genius in your business or career. Once again, the email address to send that screenshot of your review to is info@spiritualgenius.org. And remember, as always, the content of this episode and every other episode of this show are for entertainment purposes only. No solicitations are being made of the audience, and this show is not in any way intended to provide or be a substitute for any medical, legal, or financial advice. It is strongly recommended that you consult with a licensed professional before making any and all decisions around these matters. Till next time, stay well and remember that your spiritual genius awaits.